Hey everybody, Baily Hancock here, and you are back for another episode of the Baily Hancock Show. We have a really exciting guest today. Her name is Laura Youngkin, and she is a fellow multi-passionate like myself and probably a ton of you. She is a producer, a creative consultant, and also the creator of the Brave Millennial, which I'm going to let Laura tell us all about all of those things. So welcome to the party, Laura.
Hi, Baily. Thank you for having me.
You are so welcome. So for everybody out there that doesn't know Laura, but you should, now you will. Laura started her career, or I guess one of the last pieces of her corporate type career was with Disney as an Imagineer. And that's one of those jobs that people just seem to have on their vision boards of cool jobs to have. So I want to learn how you went from undergrad to landing at Disney, all the cool stuff in between, and then we'll go from there.
Great. I'll try to give you the short version of this story. So I'm just a girl from Dallas, Texas. I grew up in the suburbs of Dallas. I grew up always being in the arts. And in Texas, the arts are really competitive, just like sports. So they kind of train you to be like the best at violin or the best at choir, the best at theater, whatever. So I grew up in the arts. I was always in performing, dance, theater, music, etc. And I always knew that I would work in the entertainment business from a very young age. I don't know how I came by that clarity, but I just knew. So in college, I went to Baylor University. I stayed a little bit closer to home. My dad was battling cancer when I was in college, and so I didn't want to be really far away. So I went to Baylor, and I was a theater major there. And about halfway through my time at Baylor, I realized that I was going to have to broaden my scope a little bit, or like reconsider how I was going to make a living in the world, being in the arts. And I had always kind of pursued that work as a performer, or maybe dreamed of being a director, maybe a writer, not really sure. But I realized, kind of halfway through, like I've always been kind of naturally the kid who was in charge of the group project, right?
No.
Right, yeah. You could probably
have a lot in common.
Right. So I always found myself kind of like moving into these like, leadership roles. And I'm really good at visioning and coordinating and managing and like really executing on a creative vision and being able to see all of the different parts and pieces that need to fit together in order to make something happen. And I was lucky to get an internship working for a Broadway producer in between my sophomore and junior year of college. And I did that 2 summers. And it completely changed my life and my path. It was really tough. I mean, I made $100 a week, no joke, living in New York. I made $100 a week. I lived in a co-op above the theater, which was in Times Square. It's one of the oldest, it's still there. It's now a hotel, sadly. But at the time, it was one of the oldest still operating theaters in the district. It's where Rodgers and Hammerstein sat at the counter in the Lambs Club in like Rote, Oklahoma. Like it has a lot of history there. So I lived in a room with another girl in a co-op on top of the theater. And then I worked in the theater 6 days a week. And that experience totally changed my life. And the wonderful woman who runs that company named Carolyn Copeland, she's a producer, and she really mentored me into that space and said, you are good at this. It's instinctual for you. I think that you should consider pursuing this professionally after school.
And what were you doing at the theater?
So at the theater, I was assisting Carolyn. She had a few people on staff. We produced a comedy festival that summer. She had a big off-Broadway show that was going on. And so I kind of filled in the gaps wherever I needed to. I ran the box office. I helped produce the comedy festival. I was the production stage manager on 2 of those shows. We developed a new touring show, which then I worked on that tour for a couple more years, actually going to like really random spots throughout the US. So it was like a pretty quintessential New York theater gig. I kind of did whatever was asked of me. So whether that was like completely relighting, rehanging and circuiting and cabling like a brand new lighting system for our theater, or, hosting out of town performers, you name it. The 6 of us, there were like 6 interns that summer. We kind of worked as a team in that regard. And then I also shadowed Carolyn on a lot of different things. And that was amazing. She provided me a lot of opportunity between that time and the time that I moved to LA. So that was when I kind of decided like, all right, I'm going to be a producer. I need to figure out what that means. And the word is so ambiguous still. People are like,
I was going to say,
what does that mean?
Tell us what exactly that means, because especially in LA, it gets thrown around a lot.
Right. It's all over the place. I mean, we could talk for a whole hour about all the different types of producers. A lot of movie producers or kind of entertainment producers, the way we think about it in the mainstream entertainment business, is really people who put up the money to make something happen. So a lot of producers are actually just investors. And then there are other producers who are actual, I would say, like show makers, people who lead and create and make and shepherd and really produce like a final product of some kind that can then be marketed and sold.
Would you refer to a producer, like say a show as a company and a producer as the CEO?
Yes, CEO or COO.
So somebody actually running stuff, not just the
someone who runs stuff and who like manages a staff and helps cast and helps really partners really well with a director or whatever kind of creative capacity. In the theme park business, it's different than it is in the movie or TV business. But a leader and really someone who's responsible for delivering on the creative vision and getting whatever you need to make that happen. So a good rule of thumb, you just get shit done. And it's really about like, what do these people need in order to make this the best absolute version of this thing that it can be? And that means that you are both have a seat at the table at a very high level, and you are also like in the trenches, like dirty work. You have to be willing to do both. So producers take on a lot of different forms, but I knew that's what I wanted to do. And there's a couple of master's programs in the U.S. at Northwestern, Columbia, UCLA, CalArts, USC, and they are producing programs for different aspects of the entertainment business. And I thought that was really interesting. Now, flashing back to like the late 2000s, we were on the brink of the Great Recession, right? Like everyone graduating from college in 06, 07,
class of 07.
Class of 07 too. And it was a really dire time. Like no one could get a job. It didn't matter if you were like pre-med or a pre-law or whatever, an English major, like no one was getting a job. I went on job interviews in DC, Chicago, Austin, Dallas, and jobs in the arts at that time were really hard to come by. We were on the brink of financial collapse. And so I feel like everybody just went to grad school because there was nothing else to do. I mean, I knew I always wanted to go to graduate school because I still envision like being in my 70s and like teaching college. So I knew I needed a master's degree. I didn't think I would do it right after undergrad, but it was just kind of the way the cookie crumbled at that point in time. I interviewed at a lot of different schools, and I ended up falling in love with this weird little hippy-dippy artist enclave in Santa Clarita, California, about 35 miles north of LA. And it's called CalArts, California Institute of the Arts, and I got in and I loved it. And so about 3 months after graduating from college, I packed everything that I could fit into an SUV and drove it to LA and never looked back. So nice. About 10 and a half years ago now.
Okay. So phase one of
phase
Laura's.
one.
Got it.
Yeah. So figured out I wanted to be a producer in college. Then I moved here. I'm in the producing program at CalArts. And I was like, well, I've never really been interested in working in film and TV, but I'm here. So I better learn this side of the business while I have the opportunity to do so. So throughout my time at school, I worked several jobs just to like pay the rent and like, you know, put food in my mouth.
Survive.
And then I did tons of internships and tons of like production work and PA work and worked for producers, agents, managers in a variety of different fields. The writer's strike happened during this time. I can't remember exactly what year that was, but it really changed the TV landscape for a few years. So there wasn't a ton of scripted content, and reality TV was booming. I wasn't, to be honest, really interested in working in reality TV. So I tried it out for a while and was like, I just don't feel like this is for me. Like I love theater. I want to get a job working on, you know, something big, whether it's like the Olympics opening ceremony or a theater company or something where there's a live component or an immersive storytelling component. And that is when I kind of turned my sights to working for Disney because I was graduating from school. I had been working in TV for a producer and I did not love it. and I wanted to change. I also, had school loans, and for the first time ever was like, maybe I should get a 9-to-5 job with benefits. Of course, no job is 9-to-5, but I was really looking for some stability in my life after having kind of been on my own since I was 18, doing 7 years of school, trying to provide for myself and kind of learn this industry. And so that brings me to a really fun story that I think I love telling this, especially to college students, because they always ask me, like, how did you get that job?
Everybody wants to know.
I know. So I didn't get my job at Disney through traditional channels whatsoever. Imagineering is a really tight-knit, kind of secretive by nature organization. It's an old organization. It's about 65 years old, started by Walt as an extension of the studio. When he decided in the 50s that he wanted to build Disneyland, he knew he needed kind of like a special laboratory for that type of innovation. So he started Imagineering. It was called WED Enterprises. It's had a lot of different evolution since then and a lot of different leadership, but it's essentially the part of the Walt Disney Company that governs and designs, creates all the theme parks, hotels, resorts, any type of physical Disney experience you're going to have, they work on it. And so
perfect for what you wanted to.
So perfect. I mean, and so cool. They have a huge live entertainment group, and so I did some research on the organization and was like, oh, wow, they have this big live entertainment arm. That would be perfect for me. I wonder if I know anyone there. And of course I didn't. And at the time, CalArts and Disney, despite the fact that Walt Disney started CalArts in the 60s, when they bought the Chouinard Art Institute and renamed it, we didn't have much of a relationship, not in the way that the school and the company do now. And so I was kind of at a loss. I was like, how do I get into this place? I've applied on the website. I've stalked people on LinkedIn. I don't know, who else do I need to write to? What do I have to do to get just a phone call back? And this was at a time where I was on the job hunt hard. I was interviewing at agencies, production companies, networks, and finding it really challenging to get in. I went to an interview at one of the top 4 talent agencies to work in their mailroom and then eventually get on an agent desk. And the woman told me that they didn't want anyone with a master's degree working in their mailroom because we all leave. And I was like, oh my God, why did I just spend all this money? And
I got turned down for bad jobs too with my master's degree. And I was like, what have I done? I took it off my resume for a while.
Yeah, I'm like, okay, I thought that this looked good for me. I guess not. I don't know.
For a flight risk.
I guess. And so I was really just feeling discouraged. And I was like, I'm going to have to do something kind of drastic, I think. So I am a pretty strategic, networker, relationship builder. And I was like, all right, I got to find another way into this place. So over the summer, after I graduated, CalArts, I don't know if much has changed in the last few years, but CalArts IT was pretty old school. We still did class sign up on paper. You had to go on a class sign up day and talk to your professor. They sign a piece of paper. Then you stand in an hour-long line to register. It was very old school, and the IT was pretty, 80s. And so over the summer, I was like, I used to work in the advancement office. I had 2 work study jobs, alumni relations and advancement. So I had access as a work study student to all the fundraising and alumni databases for the school. God, they're probably going to call me after this.
They're officially shutting those files down right now.
Yeah, they are. So I went up there over the summer on a summer Friday and was able to get into the office through some smooth talking to the security guys. And I still had my school ID, and I was like, I'm just going to try this. And so I went on my old computer, my old student computer, and I logged in, and my login still worked. And I ran a database search in the alumni and fundraising databases, like I had done a million times before for other outreach reasons. And I just ran Disney, Pixar, Imagineering, Tim Burton, et cetera. Any alumni associated with the company. I ran the list, I printed it, I took it home, and I spent 2 weeks there were hundreds of names on the list, and I spent 2 weeks researching every single one of those people. Now, some of them were no longer with us because the list was very old, but I basically made an Excel spreadsheet. So I put in everybody's names, and then I just started with an internet search. And over the course of those 2 weeks, I whittled all of those names down to this one guy. He was about 20 years older than me, CalArts alum from the directing program, had a very lovely career in like professional regional theater, and now was the vice president of theatrical development at Imagineering. And I was like, oh, well, that's my guy. I gotta talk to this guy. So I was like, well, I just need to get like an informational meeting with him, and then I'll ask him a million questions and I'll figure out my next step. So this was in summer of 2010. And I wrote to the head of alumni relations. She didn't know him, but was willing to kind of make a connection on my behalf. He asked me to send like an actual snail mail written letter in the mail, which I was like, oh, okay, old school. So I did that.
I feel like that's just on pace with the analog like way that you went about this. Anyway.
Right? It was. And now actually I still do a lot of things analog, which I think there's some merit to. We can come back to that. But she wrote to him, and then I sent the letter. And then a few weeks later, I got a phone call from his secretary, also very old school, to set up an informational 30-minute meet and greet for us. And I was like, oh, great. I'm available literally anytime. I will take off work. I will do whatever I have to do to be there. And so that meeting got set, and then it got pushed like by 4 weeks, like 5 months in a row. And once I was on the inside, of course, I realized like why those things happen. I traveled a ton when I was working at Imagineering, and the executives also travel so much. And this particular person is on the road constantly. And so that meeting kept getting pushed, but I was very diligent. I followed up with his secretary either by phone or by email every other week for almost 6 months, just to confirm that like this meeting was happening. And I was very persistent with them. And I honestly think that at the end of the day, they were like, can we please just hire this girl because she's not going away? We should just put her to work. But eventually that meeting happened. And this mentor of mine brought his producing partner to the meeting. And it was supposed to be like a 30-minute meet and greet, turned into a 2-hour meeting. And I walked out with my first job. It took
Which role did you get?
So I was nothing. They were like, well, we don't really hire people into this group, but like, you've been out of school, what, half a year? Maybe you could still be our intern. And in my mind, I was like, are you serious? Like I've been
master's degree.
I've been an intern for like 8 years. Like I have done a million internships. I have a master's. What are you talking about? And then he told me what they were paying hourly interns who have graduate degrees. And it was more money than anyone had ever paid me. And I was like, oh,
you can call me whatever you want.
Yeah, well, that's what I said. I said, I'll be anything. I'll be your intern. I'll be your grandma. You can call me literally anything. And they laughed and they were like, okay, great. Well, we'll get the paperwork rolling and the ball rolling to figure out if we can bring you on as an intern. And so I just didn't care about the job title because it was the way in. And the only other way to get an internship at Disney is to be a part of the Imaginations program, which I was not. And so I felt like I had to just jump at this chance and like let ego and all of that like fall to the wayside, which I think is good advice in general.
It totally is. And that comes up a lot in these conversations is the people that were able to set their ego aside for a bit to just get a foot in the door, get some experience, even if you weren't making jack shit for money, they ended up ultimately succeeding because of that.
Right. Well, it's just a way to start kind of building a foundation. You build relationships, you meet people, and you get to work on some cool stuff. So that took another 3 months, and I had to also be very persistent about like, when is this happening? Like, when can I resign my other job? Like, I need the paperwork.
So it was another 3 months until you even got to start?
It didn't even happen right away. So 3 months later, finally, I started. And that first year that I was there was a really like magical time in my life. It was really challenging. I was the first person in this role. So I had to kind of like build the role from scratch. A lot of people didn't really know what to do with me. It was a huge corporate, like behemoth place to try to understand. I had to learn a culture. I had to learn the way that they communicate, the vernacular, all these people. I'm talking just so many people. And it was a lot to navigate. I was tasked with some like pretty big projects, like right out of the gate. I made a ton of mistakes. I failed a lot. I pissed people off. And I learned how to go back and correct and take responsibility and apologize and correct, redirect, whatever I needed to do. I had an amazing boss, and he's someone that I'm still close with and has been a great friend and mentor to me over the last 7 years. So I met amazing people. The first year was great. I was in the live entertainment group. After a year, I hopped across the street to the more attractions focused group that does like the big theme park stuff. And that was fun because it really is kind of a top secret laboratory. I mean, I remember being a kid watching the Disney Channel in the 90s, and the Imagineers would come on and talk about what's going on at Disney World or Disneyland. I thought that was so cool. So it was fun to kind of peek behind the curtain and see 140 different disciplines of arts and sciences and engineering kind of merge. And those 5 years changed my life. I met my husband at a party I wasn't even supposed to be at because I crashed it.
I feel like there's a theme with you, Laura. You give yourself an invitation and then you make shit happen. I don't know. Maybe the older I'm
never
apologize for that either.
I've gotten maybe a little bit less like, I don't know. I was really good at it in my 20s. I just kind of knew to play the card. I was like, oh, I'm not invited to this party, but like I can just play I'm young and I'm new.
Right.
And I will just apologize. I did learn at Disney that it's better to ask for forgiveness than for permission. Otherwise, you'll never get anywhere or get anything done. And that's almost in any business.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was a really magical time. It was like going to design school and business school all in one. And I found myself working on the core creative team for the big Avatar project that was just open earlier this year at Walt Disney World. And that exposed me to all types of new products and inventions and development. I mean, I learned everything I thought I would ever need to know about the construction business. I worked on a huge robotics project, and it really challenged me to be a continual learner, but also to kind of take all of my theatrical skill sets, collaboration, mostly skill set, and kind of be able to apply it to any task at hand. So whether we had, some of these budgets were huge, but it's like, how do we spend this like behemoth amount of money? That behemoth amount of money still was never enough for like what we were trying to accomplish with all the people that we needed to work with. So I had to learn a lot. It was just like a continual learning curve the whole time. And it was steep. And I met some really, really amazing people. And I'm really grateful to have had that experience.
I can only imagine the interesting and brilliant humans that come through those doors.
Amazing. And also genuinely like wonderful human beings. And so I'm grateful to still have those relationships. I've also learned that those types of relationships transcend geography, and they transcend like whether or not you work at the same company.
Well, I think that's something people often forget about their jobs is you never have to let go of those connections of your former colleagues, your bosses, your mentors, the people below you. Like that becomes your foundation of your connection, of your network.
I'm also a big believer in like the loose connection, right? Maybe I worked with someone, or maybe I met them once, or maybe I didn't work with them at all. And later on the road, I find them and we know the same person or we connect, and that's how opportunities manifest themselves. And so that was probably the best part about being there. Lots of travel, a lot of exposure, and yeah, just a serious amount of learning, like intense amount of learning. And to be honest, an intense amount of personal development. It really like, you change as an adult. I felt like that was a huge kind of transition into adulthood for me. Trial by fire is a very refining experience. And so I feel like I came out more myself on the end of that, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, it absolutely does. Those are some important years. So how long did you end up being with Disney? What age did you move on to your next piece?
So I left at 30. I was there for 5 years. I left at 30, and so the last 2, almost 3 years now have been like a totally different adventure, like a completely different, unexpected thing.
Because this is what I love to hear about is when you're on such a clear, even if it doesn't seem clear later, at the time, if you think, oh, I'm definitely on this path, I did this, I got this degree, I went to this company, now I'm doing this, and I'll probably keep doing this. And then you take a sidestep or you take a side street and you like go a different direction. I love those stories. So
oh man, okay. Well, I got it for you. So I can totally relate to what you're saying. I was always, I mean, as a producer, I mean, my job is to like make the plan, work the plan, like mitigate risk, anticipate people's needs, anticipate problems, be in front of everything. And so I've always really, I have always been a real hustler, I feel, and I really had a plan and a vision, and I worked it. And I got where I was. I moved through the organization, and I kind of ended up where I was at the age of 30 because I had worked really hard and pushed to be there. And so when the time came for me to leave and to embark on something different, it was a disruption in my plan. And so without, going into it, I kind of had to make a decision unexpectedly to choose whether or not my husband and I, he was also working there, whether we were going to like both keep our jobs or we were going to cohabitate for 2 years. So he was being sent to Florida, and in the end I was going to be held back. And we just decided, we've only been married for a year. We're not going to live apart for 2 years. I would rather be married in 20 years, frankly, and have that relationship than like, I don't know, have a credit on a theme park ride somewhere, to be honest. So it was a tough time though, because I really had to look at like, what is more important for me in the long run? Like not just now, but like in the future, what is, and how is this going to impact my career development, or where is this going to lead me? And as a woman too, I didn't think at 30, like I would be kind of already pigeonholed into the, like, you must choose family or career situation. That's a whole other conversation, but the feminist in me was like really struggled with this decision. So I chose to resign, and that meant that I was 10 days later, literally, I picked up and moved to Florida. And I lived in Orlando, downtown Orlando, for a year and a half. And while Dylan worked on this project, and then we came back to LA about 6 months ago. But A, leaving my company, and B, moving to a new city, and C, having no idea what I was going to do next, kind of threw me into a tailspin. That was
a lot of upheaval.
It was a lot of change in 2015. That was a rough year. I also, the stress of like making this decision, which drug out for many months before I finally, we as a couple decided what to do. The stress of that situation just made me sick. I mean, I had a stomach ulcer. I had a lot of health problems. I was not sleeping. It was a really rough time in my life. And so work and life all bled together, and I was not at my best at all. I wasn't healthy. I wasn't doing the best work I could be doing. And so all of that upheaval, it took me time to frankly recover from that. And since I left home to go to college, I have never had a break. In school, I worked 3 or 4 jobs. I had to pay for school. I had to keep myself afloat. And so, working to support yourself while you're in school is a challenge. Lots of people do it, but it's very time consuming. And then as soon as I got the job at Diz, I was just like working like crazy. So I never had taken a break. Like self-care was not in my vocabulary. It was not a thing I did. I pushed it to the max all the time. And I think after like 12 solid years of doing that, my body was finally like, hey, you're 30 now. This isn't going to work for you anymore. So when we got to Florida, my first line of business was frankly like getting better. Like I had major digestive health issues going on, and I had to heal myself, like literally heal myself inside out. And so I started there. And I actually, Florida, I found it to be a strangely very restorative place. Like I totally get why everybody retires there now.
Yeah. It's humid. So like your skin feels nice.
Oh my God. All the time.
It's like sunny all the time, except for then it downpours in the middle of the day, which itself is a restorative thing. It's like, hey, 2 hours from 2 to 4 every day. You can't do anything else. Okay. So take a nap, relax. It's awesome. Right. In LA, it's like you feel guilty if you stay inside or you're not going all the time because it's so pretty out.
I know I've been here long enough that I'm over that now, but yes, I totally understand. But Florida was so restorative. So I kind of had some choices. I had a few job offers from companies in Florida, but to be honest, I felt just like I needed a break. And for the first time in my life, I could actually take one. I had the luxury of saying like, I might take like 3 months to myself and like figure out what to do, what to do next. It was like the end of the year. And so, oh gosh, I think I'm gonna get the hiccups. Sorry, babe.
Excellent. This is real life.
I just guzzled like so much sparkling water before we got on the phone. What are you going to do? So it was at the end of the year. And so I was like, you know what? I'm just going to take some time and figure out what I'm going to do next. So I thought about it a lot. I talked with a lot of mentors of mine, and they all gave me, of course, like various advice. But everybody said, like, take this moment to like take a step back. And for once, think about, what do you want to do? Like, you clearly weren't always happy in what you were doing. If you could,
nobody is though.
Right, nobody is. But like, rewrite the script. Like, what would it look like for you if you had to just like start fresh? And that was just something that like, that's not intuitive to me. I didn't know how to do that. So I decided, you know what, I am going to start my own creative consulting business. There's a lot of potential clients here for me in Florida while we're here. And I'm just going to try my hand at this and see where it goes. So that was the first line of business. I opened an LLC. I learned how to do that, start a small business. I learned a lot about consulting, and I just kind of launched into it. And that is what I'm still doing now. And it's really fulfilling and great. And as you know, it's both challenging, but also incredibly rewarding to just be the master of your own work and schedule and things like that. So that was the first decision. The second decision was to kind of embark and act on a kind of a creative social justice, like activism, kind of deep-seated desire that I had, which was to really understand what's happening in our country for millennial women at work. And it's so interesting now. And
I was going to say, because this was what, 2 years ago?
This was. So it's almost been 2 years. So in early 2016 in January, I, with the help of a friend, launched the website for Brave Millennial and kind of got started on what that was going to be. It was always envisioned from my perspective to be this project. This was my pipe dream. I was like, well, I'm a producer. I bet I could go around the country and host events. And I bet I could talk to like, I don't know, maybe 200 or 300 millennial women. And I bet I could go to at least like 8 or 10 cities. And I really want to know like what's going on with millennial women at work. I felt like in the entertainment business, I had encountered just so much sexism, and, you know, it's on a spectrum. It's like from sexual harassment all the way to just like people interrupting you in meetings and people stealing your ideas and people being disrespectful of you because you're young and female. I had a boss once that told me, you know, Laura, you're really good at what you do, but at the end of the day, you have to remember that you're young and you're a woman, and there's just certain things people don't want to hear from you. And I've never clearly forgotten that quote. And it just kind of like spurred this desire in me to be like, man, entertainment is kind of a tough gig for women, but I wonder if like women working in healthcare or insurance or manufacturing or tech or the law or all these other industries, I wondered what was going on for them, and particularly women like mid-20s to mid-30s. And so I kind of dove into a lot of research. A lot of big consulting firms, Deloitte, McKinsey, PwC, a lot of firms do millennial insight surveys every year. They put out big, you know, data reports and strategy reports on like the state of millennials around the world. So I dove into those, and they were all really helpful, but they all lacked story. They lacked connection.
They were just hard data.
It's just hard data, and it doesn't really like connect you to a real person's experience. And so I crafted this survey, and with the help of a friend, kind of did a pilot event in like March of 2016 in LA, where we invited a lot of our friends to gather together, about 30 women, and they took about a 65 question survey before they came in the room. We crunched all their answers, mostly qualitative, but looked at the trends and the insights. And then we crafted a 3-hour conversation based on what we'd heard, and hosted them for like wine and food, and really tried to create, and in the end, I think I did create a safe space in all of these different cities I visited for women to talk about in private, frankly, what we're all talking about in public right now. But even a year ago, we weren't.
Yeah.
And so when I started this project and people were like, well, why are you doing this? And I said, well, I've seen a lot of really kind of gross stuff going in the entertainment business, and I want to know if that's happening elsewhere. And I also want to empower my peers to know that there's strength in numbers, and that if we get all this out in the open and we really talk about it, even though we all feel shame about it, which we shouldn't, if we talk about this, we together can A, support each other, and B, come up with solutions and ideas for really enacting meaningful change. And so in one way, somebody the other day was like, Laura, you were kind of ahead of the curve on this a little bit. I'm like, yeah, but not really. I mean, women have been dealing with all this stuff from like time immemorial, but yeah, I really wanted to like dig up some of that dirt, frankly, and get it out there so that we could talk about it. And it's just not something we talked about. It was always in private. It was never in public. It's not something you want to admit. Oh yeah, I've dealt with horrible gender discrimination, or people have said awful things to me about my appearance or the sound of my voice, or, whatever. I've seen and experienced myself a lot. I knew that for other women, and particularly my peers who are women of color, there was like a monumental barrier there for a lot of them. And I wanted to learn more about that. So I raised some money, like I would if I were doing, a film or something else. I raised some money, and I kind of just set out with this goal of, by the end of 2016, I wanted to go to as many cities as possible, host these events, and collect these insights and all this data. And so that's what I did. I did 11 events over the course of about 10 months, which I'll never do again. And it's hard to be the like executive producer and star of like the same show on the same night. It was really challenging. I was very fortunate. I had great sponsors. I had a lot of help in every city. My amazing husband went with me many times to just like do the grunt work of putting these events on. Friends in every city turned out to help and also to attend. And it was one of the like biggest adventures of my life. And I met amazing people, and we talked about really, really hard topics, not just what it's like to be a young woman in the workplace, but also like what's going on in our world. In 2016, we were in the middle of a contentious election. So that also shaped our conversation. Like, what is our place in the world? What is our place for like moving society forward? What are we going to contribute? And it was incredible. I think one of my biggest takeaways that I wasn't expecting to find is that everywhere I went, I had a plan for the night, and by the second half of the evening, we always organically moved into like wherever this group wanted to go. Every city was different, but every single city, no matter where I was, the group of women in the room who come from all different socioeconomic backgrounds, like you name it, all of them, organically, the attitude shifted to like, sure, we've experienced these things. These are our challenges or our barriers, but what are the big problems of this world? And what are we going to do to solve them? Like, they all wanted to take ownership and responsibility of like making the world a better place, not just for themselves, but for everyone. Mm-hmm. And that was really, really inspiring for me. That is to me now, like a bona fide trait of that group of women. And they are the most educated group of women in history. And so there's a lot of value and a lot of merit there. And the ideas they came up with, the empathy that they practiced and showed each other, there were a lot of tears, a lot of laughter, and also a lot of people learning and hearing the stories of someone really different from them for the first time. In Texas, I was in Texas for 3 events about 3 weeks before the election. And I was really nervous because we are talking about a lot of issues that have now become very politically charged. And that night in Dallas, which was the event I was the most afraid of, was probably the best night of the entire tour, because women who are really different from one another and have really different or thought they had really different views from each other came together and realized that they are way more alike than they are different. And that was pretty powerful to watch.
That's amazing. So what happened after it ended? What next?
So it ended. And after it ended, I kind of had like you know how after a wedding or like a big moment in life, you have kind of like a little bit of
major come down.
Yeah. It's like, what do I do now? So I had all this information. I had all this photos and video, and I have all this stuff. And so I was like, well, in 2017 and beyond, my focus needs to be like getting this story out there. That's my job now. I need to like take these stories and create them and make them into something. And so, so that's what I've done in 2017. It's been a more, for me, inward facing year. Because I've basically last year I was on the road and I was just talking to people constantly and being very like outward with my work. This year I focused on telling this story in other avenues. So I went to South by Southwest and did a session. I've spoken at a few colleges, the Story Conference in Nashville, a few other like speaking engagements at companies privately and other places, podcast interviews, stuff like that, where I can just talk about like the value of millennial women and the things that I learned doing this tour. So that's kind of what this year's been. I've also done a ton of writing. And so I've taken some of these stories that I've learned and I've composited them into different avenues of storytelling. So I've worked on a book proposal, which is really challenging and been a really interesting, a new learning curve. I have a couple of writing partners, and we have been working on turning this concept of like, how do we show millennial women being people of value into a scripted television series? And that's getting traction, and that's really exciting.
Excellent, because that is so needed.
It is. And at the core of what I do, like I still want to make entertainment. I want to tell stories, whether it's on TV or in a theater or wherever, I want to do that. And so I want to find a way to merge like my passion, which is, you know, women, and my other passion, which is storytelling, into the same. I want those worlds to collide now.
I mean, that's best case scenario in people's careers, especially for multi-passionates, because a lot of times if you do have a lot of different skills and talents and interests, they don't always intertwine. I think it's more common to not than not have them intertwine. So for you, what probably started out as a completely different path, because it didn't have anything to do with production or entertainment or anything you had done in the past, to be able to find a way to merge them together is really beautiful and exciting. And that's kind of, those are the career moments you live for.
You do. And it's also terrifying.
Sure.
Like, I mean, it's great. And also has been really scary. And I think this has been the year where I had to look inward instead of constantly being on the go and constantly being outward facing. I had to look inward and say, like, what's holding me back from pushing this work even further? Like, what's holding me back from even pursuing other goals related to anything I've ever wanted to do? Why am I not working on those things? I had to kind of unpack that fear and really face it and be like, oh, I'm not going to be governed by this anymore. I'm not going to kind of let this like rule me or the decisions I make or the creative risks that I try to take. And so,
do you feel like that's partially being in your 30s too?
It is.
Because I feel that way.
It is. I've crossed the threshold into like, I don't want to say I've crossed the threshold into like not giving a shit. It's not that. It's just that you realize that other people's visions for you or other people's opinions about your capabilities or your capacity for whatever you want to do in life really doesn't matter. Now, in order to get anywhere in life, right, we all have to convince people along the way that we're worth listening to or we're worth partnering with or working with or paying attention to, right? So that's part of it. But I remember as a young woman, I mean, having been in the arts, you're always kind of subject to like coaching and scrutiny. And I'm sure it's the same in sports or anything else, right? You have a coach, you have a director, you have whatever. They're giving you feedback. All the way through high school, that feedback was intended to make me better at what I was doing. Like, right? The assumption was, you're good at this, but I want to train you and coach you and help you and mentor you to be even better at it. In college, I experienced a real shift from that type of academic environment to, well, you're not really good enough. You don't look the part. You know, you're too short. You're too fat. Your voice is too weird. Oh,
I'll get them.
all of my acting teachers, chairman of my theater program. I mean, I encountered a lot of critics along the way. You're too bossy, you talk too much, whatever. I mean,
I got lots of that.
Maybe some of those things were true sometimes. That's fine. I was kind of obnoxious in college, I'll admit. But I was very, very ambitious and I wanted to work hard and I had, vision for what I wanted to do and be in life. And along the way, I've had a lot of adults in positions of power, which as a kid, you're taught to trust those people, right? It's like adults giving you advice or telling you what to do is pretty much everything.
Right.
So until I became an adult myself and I realized that I can just give myself that advice.
Well, and also that adults don't actually know what's going on either, which is a terrifying and liberating thing to learn.
I don't know why. I mean, as a college student, I look back on my time in college and I was like, wow, I let a bunch of middle-aged white men tell me what I could or could not do with my life.
Right.
As if they had some sort of definitive playbook for what I would be able to accomplish. And so, a lot of my fuel, I think, throughout my 20s was just to prove people wrong. Mm-hmm. And now I'm just not out to prove anything anymore. I've proved to myself that I can do it, that I'm capable, that I am capable of learning and still growing and evolving. I'm capable of making horrible mistakes and figuring out how to learn from them and accept them and push beyond.
And you didn't die.
I didn't die. Yep. And along the way, I've also, I think, been able to make contributions in meaningful ways and build great relationships. And so I'm in a totally new zone of life, and it's a much calmer place, which is nice.
I'm probably more confident too in a whole new way.
Totally confident, and also I'm just way more comfortable with that thing, I'm totally terrified of doing that thing. I don't even know if I can do it, but I guess I'll never know unless I try.
Yeah.
So for me, 2018, my number one goal for 2018 is to basically do and attempt to do a lot of things that I've always wanted to do creatively, that people told me I was not good enough to do or that I would never succeed at. And I'm just not going to.
What's on the list? What do we got?
To that. It's a lot of stuff. It's mostly to do with writing and creating. And then I'm going to produce this big summit for leadership this summer. Can't talk too much about that yet. I'm still doing some production work, but it's really more about how do we gather people? How do we take these small Brave Millennial conversations and make them bigger? And then I'm doing a ton of writing. I've got some columns coming out in digital outlets in 2018. I have no idea what I'm doing there. Never thought people would give me space to write or share my voice, but I was like, I'm just going to ask. And they said yes. So what do you do?
I mean,
say yes, and you figure it out afterwards.
If the listeners take anything away from this conversation, and I hope all of the conversations I'm having, is the worst that people can say is no. You don't know until you try. Even if you fail, you're going to most likely survive it. It's going to be fine.
Well, what is the Baily Hancock motto? Nothing lasts forever, good or bad.
This is true.
Yeah.
Nothing forever, good or bad.
I think about that all the time because it's not that this isn't challenging. It's challenging all the time. Running a business and then also having creative endeavors, trying to keep clients happy, trying to bring in new opportunities. I'm doing a lot of work in the diversity and inclusion space right now with what's going on in Hollywood. And that work is emotionally laborious. It's not a walk in the park, but I'm much more well equipped at this part of my life to work on some of these things and find more fulfillment in doing that. And I also know now, and I think we don't know this when we're kids, but this is just a season.
Yeah. Oh, I think about that all the time. All of this it's just seasonal. Everything's cyclical. Even with you, I think you're, roughly not even 15 years into your career, and you've had highs, you've had lows, you've worked at Disney, and then you didn't, and then you started your own thing, and then you did this amazing work, and now you're doing something entirely different. So I think people need to remember that literally nothing is forever good or bad, and that can feel pessimistic in some respect, but I think if you consider the fact that when things are really good, pay close attention to why you're so happy and why it feels so good, because that will help inform your future decisions. And when things are bad, cling to those good moments and remember that they're just around the corner, because that's just the way the world works.
I totally agree. Like you and I mean, imagine what we're going to be talking about 2 years from now.
Who even freaking knows?
Who knows? And I think if there's anything I'd want, and I say this to young women a lot when I do talks, is like, learn, the earlier that you learn to just embrace uncertainty and like go with the flow, you know, keep your ambition and keep your vision and keep your direction. But the better you are at like being flexible with what happens, the better off you'll be. Those are the people who I think are the most successful. So, yeah, I'm kind of in the middle of it right now. I'm just in the middle of this phase.
Well, and I think
it's okay.
we'll always be in the middle of some phase, right? And
right.
So,
it's a pretty okay place to be right now.
Yeah. No, I think you're doing wonderful, fulfilling, exciting work. And I love watching everything you do, because it's always done with gusto and with passion and with a tenacity not often matched.
Thank you. Likewise.
Same. Well, I think this is a perfect place to wrap it for today. I can't wait to have you back in a year and talk all about the amazing things you've done in the last year. But I'll make sure to link to everything Laura's up to in the show notes, and we'll keep you posted on all of her exciting new things.
Perfect. Thanks, Baily. Appreciate it.
Bye.
Bye.